are live on Facebook. We are live on Instagram. Good morning, podcast listeners. You are listening to the PTL and IS Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today is Wednesday. That means it's Jerry on Ice. My name is Dustin Jones. I'm one of two lead faculty members within the Older Adult Division, teaching modern management of the Older Adult curriculum. All right, y'all. Good morning. People are rolling in here. Lovely to see y'all. Thank you for joining. Today we are talking about the new way to think about falls efficacy. The new way to think about falls efficacy. Before we hop into today's content, I do want to mention it's Wednesday, Jerry on Ice. But in my biased opinion, it is the best day of the week, even though the fitness athlete crew says it's Friday. I think it's Wednesday because it's Jerry on Ice, but it's also Hump Day. Hump Day Hustle email. Hopefully you just got that. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Jeff Moore is shooting that off I cannot remember how many people we have on that list, but it's in the thousands, tens of thousands. It's rather impressive. But the engagement has been awesome. To see you all engage with that content and to share it and then reply to those emails, we appreciate that greatly. If you are not on that list, getting those nuggets of clinical wisdom, you need to do that. ptlnice.com is where you can sign up for that. Alex Germano, she's watching live right now. I'm going to be hanging with her and the whole MOA crew. This weekend, we're doing a private course, and then we're going to be teaching in Charlotte for MOA Live at Onward Charlotte next weekend. So that's May 22nd to 23rd. So excited for that. Also, Essential Foundations, our online course, our first meeting for this current cohort is tonight. Excited to see some of y'all if you're tuning in live, but we're also going to be starting that next cohort on June 23rd. So excited for that. All right, enough of the announcements. The new way to think about falls efficacy. So I wanted to discuss this because I came across an awesome article that spoke to how we view falls efficacy and how we may want to evolve that perspective, especially in the context of something that we've been talking more about on the ICE channel, and that's falls preparedness. So if you tuned in, it was about a month ago, I did a PT on ICE and an Instagram post, Facebook post as well, about falls prevention 2.0 is really falls preparedness. And that's basically the belief that in our world of Jerry PT, we have spent so much freaking time on falls prevention in terms of what we talk about, in terms of what we research. And if you look at that focus, its impact has not necessarily helped. Falls and injuries from falls and the cost of falls has continued to go up over the past decade or so, almost up to 30% in some particular statistical categories. And so all that focus isn't necessarily helping. So how do we want to think about this? It may be time for a change. And so what we were proposing is that, yes, we want to try and work to prevent a fall, but what if we prepared people in the event of a fall? What if by preparing someone, we could actually help prevent them? And the mechanisms for that could be many, right? One of them could definitely be that we're just building people's capacity overall. But one of the big ones in the focus of falls preparedness is that we're actually building falls efficacy. One of the main focuses of falls preparedness is that we are building falls efficacy. Now let's dive into that term. In 1990, way back in 1990, Tinetti introduced this term, and basically the definition, as it stood back then, was that falls efficacy is an individual's perceived performance of activities without losing balance or falling. All right, that was the definition. I'll say that one more time. Is an individual's perceived performance of activities without losing balance or falling. And so with falls preparedness, if someone is prepared for a fall, they're confident in their ability to handle a fall, and therefore they are going to have high falls efficacy. Now, falls efficacy, introduced back in 1990, right? Since then, it's been studied a ton. There's been several scales developed for this. The FES was the original one, then the FES-I, ABC, the activity-specific balance confidence scale. It's kind of came from some of that early research. It's also very predictive of falls risk. So we know that if someone has high falls efficacy and they're confident in their ability, in their balance, and their ability to handle a fall or prevent a fall from happening, they typically have a lower risk of falling. So it's a big deal. Falls efficacy is a big deal. But that older perspective, that older definition is not as all-encompassing as what we may want to take on nowadays. That perception of an individual's performance of activities without losing balance or falling really only gets one side of the equation in regards to falls. And so this paper, I'm going to link to this paper in the Facebook comments. So the Instagrammers, check Facebook. Podcasters, check Facebook for a link to these articles. So this article, Falls Efficacy, Extending the Understanding of Self-Efficacy in Older Adults Towards Managing Falls. And so their proposed definition, or what they're trying to get us to think about, is that falls efficacy should be considered across a continuum of the different phases of falling. And I freaking love how they broke this down. So they broke down this continuum into 4 distinct phases of falling. That's pre-fall, that's near fall, number 3 is fall landing, and number 4 is a completed fall. I'll say those one more time. Number 1 is a pre-fall, 2 is near fall, 3 is fall landing, and then 4 is completed fall. And that we want to really focus on building self-efficacy across the continuum of these 4 phases to really provide a complete conceptual understanding of people's efficacy in something like a fall. Now, if you look at those 4 things, let you know if you're listening to the podcast, that can be difficult. I did a post on Instagram that you all can check out. I'll link to that as well, that broke some of this down. But if you think about it from these 4 phases, pre-fall and near fall, the first 2, that's really falls prevention, right? When we think about typical falls prevention programs, what we're screening, what we're trying to focus on in terms of our interventions, that's really falls prevention when you look at it. Number 3 and number 4 is fall landing and completed fall. That's falls preparedness. That's training people to be prepared in the event of a fall. And I love how this paper really pushes us to view falls efficacy, and I would say even falls prevention, in this bigger perspective, that we're preventing falls, but we're also preparing people in the event of a fall. And so our goal clinically, if we're going to apply this stuff, and I think regardless of the setting, even you acute care folks, even the folks in the SNF, the outpatient folks is going to be definitely applicable to you all, definitely in the home, is that we want to think about these 4 phases of a fall, and we want to build capacity in those, but we also want to build confidence. Capacity and confidence across these 4 domains. So let's talk about what we may want to focus on across these 4 different domains and related to a fall. So the first one is pre-fall. I would say this is the one that many of you all are already doing. And if you're not, you need to be focused more on this. And that's the typical falls prevention, that we're screening for falls risk. We've talked a ton about that in our courses, and then also on the Jerry on Ice podcast. It's screening, but it's also assessing someone's balance capacity in a manner that's actually going to give you helpful information that's going to influence your particular interventions. It is going to be exercise prescription to particular individual deficits. We don't want to just give the generic tandem stance exercise, right? Christine had a great podcast on tandem stance is the new ankle pump of balance training. We don't want to fall into that trap. We also want our programs to be multidimensional. We know that exercise alone is not as good as exercise plus maybe checking someone's environment or doing medication reconciliation, for example. So that's falls prevention. You all have heard lots about that on this podcast. That's kind of that pre-fall phase. Number 2 is near fall. And I would say this is still in the realm of falls prevention, but this is becoming more discussed and more researched, but still not as prevalent in the clinic as what we want. And so that's near fall is really talking about your ability to prevent that fall when it is happening in terms of reaction timing and stepping strategies. So what are great ways to do this? So you can assess it really well by the mini best test. There's a great PT on Ice talking about that, where we can look at reactive postural control. But we want to do things like perturbation training, where we are pushing people to their limits, the edge of their ability, to where they're requiring upper extremity support and they're having to perform that riding response to maintain their balance. That is great to do. Power training is another great thing to do, to be able to produce force quickly, because oftentimes in that near fall situation, we need to be able to produce force quickly to be able to make sure we maintain that upright posture. Number 3, and the big one, is step training. We can do this a couple different ways, right? We can do it in a reactive manner. This is very common for those that may have a nice treadmill setup, whether it is something like an active step, which is a very, very fancy, nice treadmill that will simulate trips and slips and be able to measure your reaction timing. Or you may just have kind of a body weight supported system over a regular treadmill, and you're simulating some slips and trips and obstacles to really simulate some tripping and slipping to get that step training. That's great. You could also do it volitionally with something like the Clock Yourself app, which we've talked about a ton on this podcast as well. Those are great things. Those are in that near fall category. So many of you all are already doing that. Continue to do that and do it well with your older adults, because I guarantee you are probably picking up on a lot of issues that you could really move the needle forward and progress to ultimately prevent a fall. Now, 3 and 4, more in the realm of falls preparedness, right? 3 is fall landing. So I want you all to check out, if you are an APTA member or you get the PTJ Physical Therapy Journal, I'm going to link to an awesome case report that was released, I think, at the end of last year, so the end of 2020. It's the utilization of safe fall landing strategies in PT management of the Jerry population, a case report. And this is a pretty short read, some great supplemental videos that talked about how we can actually leverage safe fall landing strategies in older adults. When you typically hear about safe fall landing strategies, it's usually in youth athletics, but I would say it's even more pertinent and more applicable for the older adult. So what do we want to focus on in that realm? First off, we want to be doing some type of upper extremity and lower extremity plyometric training. Yes, I said it, plyos for older adults. Now, you can obviously scale these, right? But we want people to be able to decelerate their body weight in a controlled manner. So something like plyometric push-ups, which when many of you all hear me say that, you're thinking, yeah, right. How am I going to get my patient to do that? In a matter of scaling, maybe doing these on a countertop or against a wall or an elevated surface, so they're a little more vertical. Something like that, you would be able to do some type of upper extremity plyo. Same thing for lower extremity plyometrics. Maybe some little squat jumps. You may have some upper extremity assistance, but just getting people used to being able to decelerate their body weight quickly with their arms and their lower extremities is going to serve them well in regards to fall landing and many other ways as well. The second thing under fall landing is force disbursement techniques. So whenever we are falling and we are landing on the ground, we want to disperse the force across our body as much as possible, because the more focal that force is being focused, the more likely we're to have an injury or potential fracture. So this is something along the lines of getting our knees and our elbows involved in the landing strategy. So instead of the foosh falling on an outstretched hand or arm, maybe we're showing people how to absorb some of that force, disperse it across more of our musculature, and allow some elbow flexion to be able to disperse that force. In terms of lower extremities, it may be teaching people to be able to squat quickly, to lower their center of mass, but also to disperse some of that force across their musculature so they're not just landing stiff-legged. So knee and elbow flexion are going to be rather important. Also, more points of contact. It's a whole different ball game when you are landing with 2 feet versus 2 feet and 2 hands. We're dispersing that force over more points of contact that can ultimately reduce the risk of injury. We also want to avoid bony prominences like our elbows, for example, the back of our head, sacrum, things along those lines that we're trying to use more of our musculature to disperse that force. We're going to be doing more in this, definitely in our live courses, MOA Live. We have a whole lab on falls preparedness where we're going to be practicing these force disbursement techniques with folks. It's going to be awesome, and I cannot wait to do it. The first time we're doing that is going to be this weekend. Also, we want to do landing training. So there's a technique to landing in different directions. We know that most people, when they fall, they're falling in a dynamic state, and typically they are moving forward. It's some type of trip or something along those lines, and we can build their capacity for that and train it in a very scalable manner. And if you check out that article in PTJ, you're going to see some great examples of this, of where we can practice landing, but grade the height or the distance that that person is having to fall. So let's say I'm focusing on landing backwards. If I fall backwards, I may start with sitting on the ground and then just rolling back. I may start there. I may then kind of get in the crouched position, or maybe even on a tiny little stool and fall from there and work my way up to where my height increasingly rises. So I may go to tall kneeling, for example, and then I may go to standing. If you're going forward falling, same thing. You may start on your knees just in a kneeling position. You may have someone stand on a box and then have a therapy or some type of mat table that is elevated more than the box to where they are falling forward and that range of motion is reduced than if they were just standing on the level ground. That's how we can really make this more scalable and approachable for lots of folks. Lots of ways to do that. We're going to be going over that in our labs. And then last but not least, number 4 is that completed fall. Let's say they have fallen. How can they get up from a fall? These recovery strategies. We've talked about this a lot on this podcast. I'll link to a good video that Christina did on floor transfer training. There's lots of ways we can get people up off of the ground in terms of whether it's with furniture, without furniture, all kinds of different techniques based on if they have shoulder irritability or knee irritability, or they have to limit use of a particular limb. There are ways we can troubleshoot this in a very effective manner. So it may be starting off with bed mobility or ground mobility, for example, transitioning from prone to quad to half kneeling, quad to tall kneeling, or even quad up to standing. And then leveraging techniques using furniture or not using furniture to give people options to have the efficacy, the self-efficacy to be able to handle that situation when it may occur. I will also link to a really awesome video that an OT did. I think it was titled How to Get Off the Floor MacGyver Style. That gives you likely 30 options to use common household items and furniture to be able to come off the ground, which is very helpful. And when I zoom out, if we think about all of these phases, right? The pre-fall, the near fall, the fall landing, the completed fall, if we are really framing our interventions and building fall's efficacy and capacity in all of those phases, think about how robust and resilient you just made that person. Their balance is going to be better. They're likely going to be a little bit stronger. They're going to be able to handle a lot of uncertainty. They're going to be more confident. They're going to be able to handle the worst of the worst. And that is a beautiful thing. You think about the confidence that you're giving someone and how that could impact their life, the decisions that they make in terms of that may be the difference between them actually increasing their activity levels and being a community dwelling older adult, for example, if they have that type of self-efficacy and confidence. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. This framework was really helpful for me to think about. But I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Is this helpful? How do you think about fall's efficacy? Do you think of through these 4 phases? And I would love to hear, are you even addressing the fall landing or the completed fall part? I think that's a whole new territory that we can definitely bump up our game. And I know we've been speaking to the completed fall, the recovery portion of it a good bit within this suite of clinical excellence. But the fall landing piece, the safe fall landing strategies, is kind of the new frontier that we're going to be going and speaking more to, which I'm really excited about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts for the Facebook watchers, the viewers, the Instagram viewers, and the podcast listeners. The Facebook video is going to have all the links to the videos and the articles that I referenced, so be sure to check that out. And I would love to hear y'all's thoughts, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, about this content. We love it when you all shoot us an email or reply on some of these videos to engage in this content. It helps us all in terms of refine our thinking and hopefully be better as a result. All right, that's it. Sorry I went long, but I'm really interested in this topic. I hope you are too. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. You all have a lovely Wednesday, and I will talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.